to kind of keep it looking like this. And if I can't keep it looking like this, I'd rather somebody else have it in where they can keep it looking like this. Okay? Now, you go, well, what are you going to do if you sell this? My wife and I have been heavily involved with the children's home in Greenwood, South Carolina, called Connie Maxwell Children's Home. It used to be, and it still is, a Baptist-supported children's home. And it's been there 130 years, okay? And they want to build a healing, a trauma and healing center, and to take care of children that have been traumatized. As they tell me, and this is way above my pay grade, in order to do that, you have to move that trauma from one section of a person's brain to another one before they can release it. And I am committed. I'm committed to see that through. We're going to build that. We're going to build that trauma and healing center so we can take care. I'll give you an example. The little boy I saw there is about 8 years old, riding his bicycle, and I said, Danny, that's the director. I said, Danny, what's the story on him? Listen to this. He said he's been sexually abused by his grandfather since he was 3 years old. Now that's trauma. Now he needs some help. And we don't have people really trained. They're going all the way to Texas, where this guy started this center 20 years ago, and when Oprah Winfrey found out what he was doing, she started supporting. And so he is the authority in the world today on that type of centers. And when they went out, this group from Greenwood went out there in November, he was in Australia on a seminar. That's how it happened. And so that's what we want to bring to South Carolina. And once we get it established in Greenwood, we want to put a center in Columbia and one in Florence. So we'll have the state covered with children. And I say children, I mean teenagers too. Think about the teenagers that you know that when COVID hit and we started back to school, my granddaughter was one. They had problems going back to school because everything has been upside down in their brain. And my daughter cared for the counselors and this, but you know, I really think that this group, this center could have helped. So that's what I'm going to do the remainder of my life. I'm going to help children that never had a chance. My grandchildren will have every opportunity, and I plan to leave them something. But I'm more interested in children that never had a chance. And those children up there in that children's home, unless somebody like they have done, they never had a chance, and I want to give them a chance. You know, I want to give them, and they put this in their little booklet, and I believe this. And you think about it after I tell you this, and you'll see that I'm right. It's not hard for a person to make a mark in the world today. The true test is the mark he leaves behind when he's gone. I want to leave one behind when I'm gone. And I think I can do it with that children's home and those children, and that's what the rest of my life is going to be about. Now, do I have any questions about why we were selling this? Now, saying that, let me tell you, Goodwill, and I've said this ever since I bought it, Goodwill is bigger than me. Goodwill is bigger than any individual. Goodwill has so much history and so much African American history. You go to a plantation down on the coast and they carry you to the big mansion, right? Well, when you come to Goodwill Plantation, you go and see where your ancestors worked. You see where they lived. And we tell you their names. I have in my hand here Charles Hayward's field record book. And I'm sure it's got some of your ancestors' names in this right here. Titus and I went to the University of South Carolina, and we found this, and the university wouldn't let us check out that That was original field record.
Brand Dr. Donaldson.
We got mad about that, didn't we? Yeah. And they said, no, well, we'll make you a copy, but you can't check it out. So we made a copy of what they had there, and I'm sure that you could find some of your ancestors right here. Okay? So this place is too valuable to African American history and culture to end up something other than that. And that's why Barbara, Weston, and Titus, and the more of you and myself have talked and said, look, if they can put the funds together, and I don't have a problem with the Congaree, we got the guy here from the Congaree National Park, and that's great. I don't have a problem. I love the Congaree National Park. I'm glad it's there. But if we can get funds for the Congaree National Park, why couldn't we get funds for an African American cultural center? And do you know, have you been on a place any better than this for an African American cultural center? No. Sitting right there, y'all know Reverend Charles Jackson from the Brooklyn Avenue Baptist Church. Reverend Jackson came down with his choir, and they made pictures of all of them standing in the windows of the cabin, part of their choir. It's a part of them that have been on the Today Show. Okay, they've been on the Today Show. And he came down with them. He was sitting right there one afternoon, and I was somewhere with them. And I walked up to him, and he had tears running down his cheek. And I said, what is it, Reverend Jackson? He said, Larry, I've been to the Underground Railroad. I've been to all of these places that have all of this African American history, that I have never been to a place that I felt the spirit of the slave like I do here. He said, this is unbelievable. And that's what I'm talking about. Those of you that came, I don't know how many years ago it was now, 12 or 15 years ago, from the church when the Congaree Land Trust had their annual meeting here, it was about 12, 15, and this had been arranged with Titus and the pastor and all, that y'all were going to come over and be a part of the Congaree Land Trust meeting, annual meeting, okay? And we were all here. They had 250 people here. I think we had 400 and something that day. We had the field full of cars, but we handled it. We could do it, no problem. We had a stage set up. We had entertainment. We had everything. We had plenty of food. Congaree Land Trust paid for it. Yeah. We were all standing here, 200 milling around here, and you people from the church started coming in, a caravan of cars coming from the church. And I'm standing over there, and I'm going, Spirit just came over this place. Well, in a little bit, I made my way over to my wife, and she said, did you have that feeling when the caravan or the people from the church started coming in? I said, yeah. It was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Miss Ann Jennings was the director of the Congaree Land Trust at that time. The next morning she called me to tell me, she said, Larry, that was the best meeting yesterday that we have ever had. And said, but I have got to ask you something. Okay, ask away. She said, I've had several of my members that called me and asked me, had anybody said anything about that when the people from the church started coming in, it was like a spirit came over the place. I said, oh yeah, it was real. It was real. And then I told her why I thought it was real. Everybody was leaving. There was two, I'm sure they've passed away now. One was in a walker, and one was in a wheelchair. Older men. They were parked right there. And they wanted to see me before they went home. Now you got to keep in mind that from 1910, roughly, to 1994, this was a place where the elite of Columbia hunted and fished. Okay, that's what that was. And so it was basically off limits to the public. Okay, they wanted to see me, so I made my way straight to them. And when I walked up to them, both of them had tears dripping off their face. And they said, "We just wanted to tell you before we left, this is one of the greatest days of our life. We finally come home." We finally come home. Now, boy, if you don't think that brought the spirit over this place, we finally come home. That's why I think it's important. And I think it should be important to each one of you and to the politicians and to those who have the power and the funds to make things like this happen. That we don't lose something that's that important. Like I say, if they had to buy the money they spend on the Congaree National Park would probably be, if we converted it into today's money, would be $300 million. And you know what it took? It took a group of people saying, "We're going to preserve this.
Yeah.
We're going to preserve this." And they did. And that's what it takes. And so I think that was worth preserving. And I think this is worth preserving. My sermon is almost over. We're going to plaster collection plate.
He missed his calling. He should.
Titus is my historian. Everybody here knows Titus. So I'm going to invite Titus up, and I know y'all hot and tired and tired of listening to me. But I've got to tell y'all something that you probably don't know. I was voted the best storyteller in South Carolina. There was an article in the state newspaper that they was going to have the competition at the State Museum parking lot, and it was a federal government sponsored thing. Now they ended that, so my daughter signed me up. My daughter, you know how kids are. She signs me up. It's going to be on a Sunday afternoon. I was supposed to be there at 3 o'clock, she said. They had this Airstream trailer with all this sound equipment and everything in that thing, and so we went to church that Sunday, and I told my daughter at lunch, I said, "What are we going to talk about?" I said, "We hadn't rehearsed anything. We got to be down there at 3 o'clock. She said, "Daddy, you don't need to rehearse anything. I'm just going to ask you some questions about growing up in Kershaw, and you're going to just take off." Okay. So we get down there, and the guy said, "You got 45 minutes. And he's behind a glass right there. And so he said, "I'm going to give you a 10-minute warning when you've got 10 minutes left." Okay. I thought I'd been there about 15 minutes, and he gave me that 10-minute warning. I'm like, "I've been here 35 minutes. And then he gave me a 5. And we finished up. Well, I didn't think anything about it. I was meeting somebody from the Corps of Engineers and the EPA down on the Triton landmine, and a guy from the Corps of Engineers showed up, and he said, "Mr. Faulkenberry, I just heard you on the radio." "You heard me on the radio?" He said, "Yeah, I just heard you on the radio. You were talking about milking a cow." I said, "Did I say I wouldn't milk a cow again if milk got to be $20 a gallon?" He said, "That was right. That's what you said." Well, the guy got there from Atlanta from the EPA, and he gets out and he said, "Mr. Faulkenberry, I just heard you on the radio." I said, "Oh, you did?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You were talking about you wouldn't milk a cow, but then you had to change it that you wouldn't milk a cow unless your grandchildren needed it." And your daughter asked you, said, "Dad, you mean you wouldn't have milked a cow for your children?" I said, "No, I wouldn't have milked a cow for my children, but I would my grandchildren." Well, I called her and I said, "Actually, these guys said that they heard me on the radio." She said, "Oh, Dad, they told me yesterday, they called me yesterday and told me that you had won, and I forgot to call you." So I was voted the best storyteller.